think post-lunch session, I think this is a very sleepy time for everybody. So I think my earlier speaker have also touched upon oil and gas, and sir has largely touched upon steel. So I'll try to be brief on those, and I'll touch upon what are the, I would say, broader challenges these industries are facing with respect to controlling pollutions. And when we talk about pollution, I primarily are looking from a lens of decarbonizing those sectors. So if we look at everyday newspaper, every sector is talking about decarbonizing their industries. And I think with India committing to its carbon market, I think about 9 to 10 sectors have been identified which are primarily being targeted. Power, steel, oil and gas, and cement, and there are others which includes textile, chemicals, paper pulp, and sectors like those. So if we look at our emission profile, this is data from 2023 report. If we look at the power consumption, which accounts for about 34% of our total emissions, and when we specifically talk about industry, excluding the power which is being again consumed by these industries, iron and steel and cement are among the top sectors which are contributing. And if we look at the sectoral contribution of industry, about 37 to 38% is from steel sector, and 12.75% primarily coming from cement sector. This is the Indian data you reported to UNFCCC, MOEFCC, the latest data which India has declared. And if we look at the sectoral growth, because while controlling the emissions, we also have to take into account the sectoral growth. So we are, as per our plan, by 2050 scenario or by 2070 scenario, we are planning to at least quadruple the power, the steel consumption, and at least triple the cement. So if we look at a very specific scenario of what is happening in power sector and what a kind of challenges power sector is facing, so I'll not go into the stats of it. I think we can always Google it up. And so if we look at the scenarios which have been talked about to reduce emissions in power sector, so if you look at, we are talking about line of sight, which is a usual scenario, or what all we are doing, where we would end up by 2070. So if we look at the scenario, so to end up net zero by 2070 in power sector, somewhere we have to reduce our coal consumptions by a large percentage. And if you see this graph, this 14% by 2050 coal is I think very fascinating to see, and I don't see that these kind of scenarios portray the practicality, considering India being the largest consumer of coal and largely depending upon the thermal power plants for our energy needs. And if we look at this scenario, I think we are already at the peak as in 2025, which I think is again a very, an estimate which is hard to believe, and an investment which we are planning to look at this line of sight is about 2.5 trillion USD, which is again very challenging to meet. Similarly, in power sector, if we look at an accelerated scenario, an investment of 3.8, coal to become absolutely zero by 2050, unbelievable to actually achieve these targets. So if you look at the sectoral challenges, what is happening in power sector is that we are heavily reliant on coal as an asset to generate power. And if we are looking at reducing coal to zero, there'll be a lot of stranded assets which gets created. And this is a major challenge which we have to look at when we are looking at power sector. We have very low PLF, about 55%. We are targeting to push it towards 65% somewhere around. Discoms are again facing a lot of challenges because the fluctuations in renewable power supplies and how the grids have to take those supplies into account. And so these have been one of the challenge. And I think there are again barriers with coal asset, even with respect to the social and the regional dependencies, may it be employment related to regional assets. So these are some of the key challenges which we could actually associate with the power sector looking at a broader picture. So if we look at iron and steel, I'll directly jump to what is India planning and what is happening. So if you look at, if you look at, we have been lot talking about EAF, induction, DRIs, but what is India seeing? So India has already planned to actually expand its BF and BOF, and we are at 59 metric ton as of now. And we are again planned to expand to 157. So we are still largely looking to expand our capacity on blast furnaces to still get our steel. And then again, we are definitely planning for EAF, but that segment is pretty small. We are already at 12 metric ton, expanding to 12, and then there is a mixed production also. And again, when we are talking about moving to DRIs, EAF, so if you look at the age of blast furnaces is typically 40 to 50 years. So our assets are relatively young. And when we talk about decarbonizing, getting rid of BF, moving to EAF, DRIs, we have to look at the stranded assets which gets created. So if you look at most of our capacity on BF are about a decade old. And it would at least last for 50 years. And when we are vis-a-vis talking about getting rid of these assets, I think that is a very optimistic picture which is getting presented. And if you look at the technology levers, I think Sir has also touched about the technology levers which people are looking into. But when we are looking at different technology lever, cost sensitivity also comes into play. And if you see the levelized cost of steel production with each technology being implemented is at least 5 to 10% cost has to go up. And when we're looking at carbon market, we're talking about CBAM. This becomes a big hurdle while implementing decarbonizing, while looking at decarbonization efforts in these sectors. So challenges, if we bring down for steel sector, I think we are heavily reliant on blast furnaces. And I think if we have to actually look at how we can actually make available clean rather making cleaner available. And there is, when we are talking about DRI, I think India has a lot of issues with scrap steel, which is not available, which is definitely readily available in US, but not in India and China. And when we talk about DRIs, I think DRI needs an iron ore of high purity, which is greater than 67%, which is again very scarce, and about only 4% global exports qualified of that iron ore grade content. And high cost of green hydrogen still, I think at the TRL level 3, 4, I think 100 tons in Germany being talked about. And I think we are still at development phase and a lot of commitment on green hydrogen already. If you look at decarbonization roadmap, highly dependent upon something which is at TRL 4, 5. Everything has been loaded to green hydrogen that it will help. It will surely develop, but the timeline which we are targeting to reduce is again becoming a challenge. And then CCUS definitely is again a challenge because of its low TRL and the current capture rates are still low. There are processes which are again at pilot level or laboratory level, which have to be looked up into scale-up potentials and how they can actually help the industry. So if we look at cement sector, I think we are all aware, but if we look at how we are planning to decarbonize cement, so about 13%, about 9% can be achieved by increasing the process efficiencies in different segments of the steel sector. About 13% with raw material alterations with respect to renewable energy usage, increasing the thermal substitution rate, bringing biomass to boilers, kind of concepts which are picking up, and then clinker factor reduction. And then if you see that from 0.66 to 0.51, about 32 to 33% can actually be achieved by all these practices. But again, if you see the load on CCUS carbon offsets, it's hugely dependent upon CCUS, which are still not taken off. Again, we have to be cost sensitive when we are talking about decarbonization efforts. I think all the speakers have touched about the cost sensitivity, as industry is always cost sensitive. So about 32 to 33%, which I earlier talked about, can actually be achieved by maintaining the cost of cement. But still, if we are looking at further going to CCUS, CCS routes, and getting to net zero, the cost of cement will directly double. So I would just sum up with a few of the challenges of cement sector, which is basically high process emission. Hard to abate sector, we all already know this, but we also have to understand that a lot of dependence upon coal and petcoke. The alternative fuels are definitely being looked at, but when we are planning to decarbonize, the whole stack emission profile changes, bringing in alternative fuels. And then when we are developing solutions at pilot laboratory level, those are much pure streams to actually decarbonize, but at actual ground, you get a very mixed flue gas stream with different fuels alterations. And I think a single solutions cannot be developed for such a variation on stack emissions at different process industries. And so in cement, we have also seen that people are proposing to use, so fly ash slags have been established because of its, I would say, more or less homogeneous compositions, and we are getting a constant quality of those. But when we are talking about composite cement, a lot of blending efforts have been made. In our institute also, we are looking at different hazardous waste which could actually be encapsulated to be utilized as a part of raw material for cement. But if you see, the uptake has been pretty low. So I was talking to MCD, then we were talking to DSIDC in Delhi, and I think they are making paver blocks using CND waste, and I think there is piles created, and there is no buyer of such alternatives. Definitely good for R&D, good to show reduction, but the market adoption has been pretty low, possibly due to awareness issues, or maybe something else, or maybe logistic constraints. I'm not sure. And even the regulations have to support. Maybe we could come up with something mandating the utilization of such alternative routes, like we have done for utilizing the waste biomass in power sectors. Energy intensive definitely is one of the challenge, and then definitely the CCUS, it's again early stage as we have discussed, and then again there is technology barrier. So India has been using different variety of kilns for cement production, and this integrating it with a single CCUS solution for cement sector, I think we need to move process specific, stream specific solutions have to be developed. And I think the carbon market which we are looking at, I think the carbon pricing have to be worked upon vis-a-vis making all these efforts primarily viable for the industry to look at when these decarbonization or emission reduction options when we are talking about. So I think all these which we have discussed presents an opportunity for R&D could be taken up into these sectors. And I think the key takeaways I would sum up in just 4 points, that we are looking into net zero in just one investment cycle. So as we talk about blast furnace, 40, 50 years, and in just one investment cycle, we want to become zero. So I think that has to be looked into while planning. And I think most of the renewable electricity, we are already doing a lot on renewables. But I think it's not practical and cost effective to shift all your heat loads to renewable. I think that has to be looked upon. And I think very few alternative processes available at very low TRLs, and a lot of promises being made on those. And every solutions which we are proposing should actually make business sense for its uptake. Yeah, I'll end here. Thank you.